What the Tech is sponsored by Hover.com. Domain names made simple. Go to gfq.hover.com and get 10% off your entire purchase. And by Stitcher Radio. Listen on the go via the Stitcher mobile app. For more information, go to stitcher.com/GFQ.
What the Tech?
Welcome, everybody, to another What the Tech. I am Andrew Zarian from New York City. And Paul is all the way on the other side of the country in San Francisco, California. How you doing, Paul?
I am well. You sound like you're in a wind tunnel or something.
Do I?
You disappeared there.
Did I? What happened?
I guess you're okay.
It's fine now?
There's a weird blotchiness.
That's weird. Oh, the video, you mean, got whacked out. There's always something happening. But this is What the Tech. We discuss things happening in tech, not necessarily tech news. But
this week it's pretty much tech news.
But this week it's pretty much tech news. Absolutely, it's going to be a lot of tech news. A lot of the information is going to be about the Microsoft Surface, the latest and greatest tablet on the market.
Even though it's not even on the market.
It's not even on the market, but it's the latest and greatest that will be hitting the market. There's a lot to get to with this. Yesterday was the big announcement. Microsoft, just only 4 days prior, sent out a message saying, hey, listen, we're having this huge event. You do not want to miss this. And the speculation began. Anywhere from a Barnes & Noble Nook Microsoft connection to them possibly purchasing RIM.
Yeah.
I mean, it was all over the place. Did you have, you kind of had a feeling what it was, right, Paul? I mean, we kind of knew, actually.
Well, actually, so, very early on, I had heard from multiple sources that it had nothing to do with a tablet, but then what you find out later on is that no one at Microsoft even knew what this was, other than a very small team, obviously. And this was a rare example of Microsoft doing a very good job of keeping a secret, so good for them. But yeah, a lot of the early rumors were around a tablet, and a lot of the stuff I had heard said, no, it's not going to be a tablet. But I had never heard definitively what it would be. I sort of speculated that because of the venue, it would probably be something media related or, TV show and movie, but it was a tablet. Or two tablets, really.
And two tablets, and pretty nice tablets.
Well,
nice-looking tablets.
Nice-looking tablets, right? If I showed you a picture of the Samsung prototype tablet they gave out a build, it would look exactly like those tablets. It looks like a great tablet, but that particular tablet, you fire that thing up and the fan noise is loud. It runs really warm. The battery life is about 2.5 hours. It's not a good tablet. And the thing for all of the excitement around this thing, obviously there's questions around a lot of those things. Battery life, cost, and some weird things that they sort of alluded to. For example, the Windows RT version of the tablet, which roughly shares the dimensions of the iPad, right, is that thin and that light, is going to ship semi-immediately or at the same time as Windows 8. But the Windows 8 Pro version of it won't ship until, I think it was 90 days later.
Yeah, they said 60, is it 90 or 60? Yeah, no, 90 days later. So 3 months after the release date. Why?
Yeah.
First, why? Why is it taking so long? B, now, who's the manufacturer of this device?
I think it's Samsung.
It's Samsung. So this is almost exactly what they gave out a build. Or they showed that build.
Well, no, we don't know that. I don't think that's
similar.
fair to say. It looks a lot like it.
Yeah.
I just, this thing is hard for me because I have all these kind of thoughts jumbled up in my head about this thing. The one thing I will say, and I have to say, I was very pleased by this. When I went onto Twitter, I was actually out last night when they announced this. So my sister was in town. We went out for dinner, and I checked in with Raphael over Messenger, and I checked in via Twitter to find out what was going on. And it was interesting. When I got home, I kind of hopped on Twitter, and I threw up some fairly obvious complaints about this thing, and people were very defensive about it. In fact, very defensive in a way that you don't ever see on the Windows side of the fence.
Very Apple-like.
Yes, I found that to be very interesting.
So
I've
what?
always thought of the Windows world as being very pragmatic, common sense, and logical driven. And suddenly, with this device, they were freaking out. And
What
like I
didn't you
said at the
like?
beginning, no one knows what the battery life is. No one knows how much these things are going to cost. And I was really surprised by how many people who just immediately wanted one, thought it was the coolest thing in the world.
So some of the things that we do know, we'll start off with the Windows RT version. It's an NVIDIA Tegra-based ARM chipset. Not surprised. It's 9.3 millimeters thick,
By the way,
676 grams.
9.3. I believe that is exactly the thickness of the iPad 3.
Yeah, because the iPad 3 is a little thicker. So it looks thicker than the iPad, but it's because it doesn't have that
It
curvature on the
looks,
bottom.
yeah, yep. It
Uh,
does look thicker. Yeah.
so it's about the same size. It's a 10.6-inch display, widescreen HD display.
No word on the resolution, at least not from Microsoft. Have you heard that from anybody?
Uh,
Because
n-
HD could
well,
be, 1366 by 768, but what if it's something else?
well,
And what if there are multiple versions?
I don't know if you saw that leaked document that claimed that this thing's going to have a 1440p display. Did you see
Okay.
that one? The output display is going to be 1440, which I found that to be very
I
interesting.
spent most of the day watching a really bad movie on an airplane. So
Oh, okay. Well, there was a leaked document apparently. I know
Yeah.
Mary Jo Foley commented on the
Okay.
leaked document, and she said that there are certain things pointing that it's not really a real document, so we don't know yet. I'm not too sure if it
But
was
how
confirmed or denied.
one of the Audible picks I had on here a few months back, if you recall, will be that Bob Lutz book.
Yeah.
Bob Lutz being the automotive industry icon, who I believe is at the age of 80 something is still at
Yeah.
GM and doing product design there or whatever. Um, that guy's amazing, and I just finished up the book, and he was talking there's all this kind of pragmatic advice in this book, but one of the things he was saying is that, the way that you communicate makes people trust you or distrust you, mistrust you, not trust you. The way Microsoft communicates, unfortunately, is the latter, and I have a problem with that. And this kind of selective release of information is, I think, damaging to their credibility. I wish that they would be more upfront. Is the keyboard cover included with it?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
is it an extra cost thing? How much does it cost? How many versions are there really? We know that there are 32 and 64 gig versions on the RT version.
On the
We know
RT
that
version, yeah.
64 and 128 on the other one. I mean, what is this thing really? I mean, they did a great job of getting people very excited about it. Kudos for that. But when you selectively release information like this, ultimately people don't trust you because you're hiding something. It doesn't make sense not to come completely clean on this. In other words, they don't even say when when they're going to talk about it again, or what. It's just weird, and this is it's kind of the awful underbelly of this announcement where these things look really cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, they say about the
by
battery
way,
life.
I just want to be very clear about this. I'm getting one of these things. At
Of
least
course,
one of
I
these.
mean, I'm definitely going to get one too. I mean,
They,
for the
they look
battery life,
excellent.
they're saying
But
that it's
I-
31.5 watt hours.
yeah, which is very different from the other one.
Yeah.
by the way.
42 watt
Yeah.
hours.
So, any attempts to find out why or what, about the stuff we don't know, they don't want to talk about it.
It's very interesting. I mean, it
Yeah,
was
I
it
don't
was a
like
very
that kind of stuff.
well, it was a big product launch or a big product unveiling, but there's really not much information about the way that they're going to market this thing. This is going to get a little confusing. The pricing,
Yep.
the RT version has to be competitive, and by competitive I mean probably $299.
It's not going to be that competitive.
You don't think
I-
it's going to be that competitive?
No, there's no way. The one thing that they said toward cost was that the x86 version, or whatever, the core version, the Intel version, would be roughly the cost of an Ultrabook.
So
Now-
$700, $800.
Yeah, I think they've given themselves $999 on that one.
Wow, that
Oh, if you were to look at well, but hold on a second. If you look at the pricing of the Samsung tablet today, the 700X, I think it's called, or whatever, it's like $1,500, and it's not a good
Yeah.
it's not a good tablet. So I also further assume, and I have to because once again they have not supplied this information, that these tablets both supply what I would call a heaping helping of Windows 8 compatible sensors, right? So when you go and you buy the Samsung tablet today, it doesn't have all of those sensors that the build prototype tablet has.
by
right.
sensors you mean what?
The accelerometers, the
accelerometer, okay.
compass, all of that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Now, the problem here is that we sort of have to assume that because these are Windows 8 devices and thus have the logo and they're made by Microsoft, that they have those things. So now we have this situation where they're shipping a device that by definition is better than the one that's out in the market today. The one that's out in the market today costs $1,500. Now, they've said Ultrabook pricing, like I said. Ultrabooks technically are supposed to be $999 and under. We know that that's not the case. I mean, Ultrabooks range anywhere from $600 or $700 all the way up to $1,500. So,
and there was another term they were using for non-Ultrabooks. I forgot what it was. Like it has the same thinness, but
yeah, I believe those names can vary by hardware maker, right? Because once it's not an Ultrabook, it's just not an Ultrabook. So, if the Intel version of this thing is more than $999, they're going to have a big problem. I think you're suggesting that even at $999 is too much.
I think $999 is way too much because
I would be shocked if this thing was less than $999.
And I'll tell you why. And also, by the way, the Intel version is thicker. It's 13.5 millimeters.
It's significantly thicker. Yeah.
So you're getting a bigger device.
Is the ARM version fanless? I would assume that it is. The Intel version being a Core i5, is that fanless? I assume that it is not.
No information about that yet.
But there's no information. I'm a little freaked by this kind of stuff. You know, when Apple introduces a product of any kind, we can go back a week or two to the new MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
They take the cover off. They show the insides. They talk about the fans. They talk about where the battery is. They do the full disclosure thing. They don't want to talk about it at all up until that point. But once they do, they give you the whole thing. You can go to their website and get the full spec list and all that kind of stuff. Oh, and by the way, you can buy it too. That's the other thing that Apple does.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's okay that they preview this thing. They want people to get excited about Windows 8 ahead of time. I'm sure that they're spacing out information about this product, you know, over time. I get it. But I'm it's too bad.
But you know what's too bad? I'll tell you what, Paul. With Apple, a lot of it is based on speculation and that momentary buy, that trigger. Oh my God, this is coming out. I can start ordering it now. I could be in the pre-order. I'm gonna order it.
I could be among the first in the world to get this thing.
And you know what? It sounds so silly, but that is a factor that plays a huge part in this.
I will say, to be fair, Apple can't always achieve that, right? The iPads. The first two iPads, I believe, they announced them, and it was months in some cases before those things actually shipped. I remember saying with the first iPad that was a big mistake because it gives people a chance to reconsider the purchase, right? That, you know, in the excitement of that first announcement, people like, you know, buy. And then when they realize it's going to be 6 to 8 weeks before the thing actually shows up at their house, maybe I don't really need this $900 toy, you know. That didn't really happen with the iPad, as it turns out. I mean, obviously the iPad has been a big success story for them. So, but this thing, you know, again, there are people who are very excited about it, and I mean excited in ways we just don't see this in the Windows world. And it's
why do you think it was announced now? I mean,
well,
we're looking at an October release for the ARM processor. Yeah. Why was it now? I don't have
a master key to their schedule, but I suspect that the Windows team and Microsoft and all of the stuff that's around Windows, I think there's a schedule, and they want to space this stuff out so that there's something every week. You know, why didn't they announce this at TechEd last week, right?
Yeah.
You could make the argument that it's not necessarily a business-oriented device, perhaps, or whatever, or that TechEd is not necessarily a place for big news announcements. But, you know, the Thursday of TechEd, they spastically called the press out to Los Angeles at the drop of a hat in a bizarre bit of Apple-style marketing that completely worked, which is the weirdest thing of all. So they're whatever, they did it, you know, good for them.
Yeah.
But again, if you're going to announce something like this, God, announce it. You know, I don't, and maybe who knows? They have marketing people there. Some of them must know what they're talking about. Here we are discussing it.
Yeah, so no, I mean, and it's a big story. It's a huge story, and strategically, if you look at it, if this was placed anywhere prior to this week, it would have been a forgotten story that possibly might have come back up in September. But here's what I saw from this. First of all, the delay was really funny. The fact that it was delayed by 40 minutes.
Yeah.
the start of this event. So I know that upset a lot of people. The time was a little bizarre because it was the East Coast dinner time.
I know. Well,
For the-
after dinner, it was
After
7 p.m. I mean, it was
7 o'clock, yeah. So it was people were settling down, and I found that interesting. But regardless of what it was and how they presented it,
Yeah.
the device is a cool looking device. I think the
is.
fact that I'm hoping that this touch screen, the touch, what are they calling it? The cover, the keyboard
Yeah.
cover, comes with this device. I'm assuming that it does at the price point that they're going to have, because if they're justifying a $499 price point with this device, they have to be giving you something more.
I don't think it's going to be that cheap. And if it is that cheap, it's not going to come with the keyboard.
For the RT.
I know, that's what I'm talking
Oh,
about. I
you
just
don't even
see
think
it
it'll be
being that cheap.
$499?
$499 would be the cheapest they would sell it at, and it can't possibly come with a keyboard for that price. I just don't see that happening. But
I mean,
you
we're
know,
forgetting
the
one.
economics of the ARM things are tough. We don't know. Like how this works exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe Microsoft will take a loss on these things. Who knows? I mean,
They did that with the Xbox. If you looked at it in that sense, just to get it out there, they took a loss with the Xbox twice, which that's a whole separate story we're going to get into after this. But
yeah.
they have to, and this is scary to think this, but they could fall under the same kind of categories Android has fallen into the last couple of years, and that's you're pricing a device at the same price point as the iPad, which is known to be dominant in this market.
All right, so this is so much more than an iPad, right?
But we know that.
On one level.
Paul. You and I know that. Our viewers know that. But how about the people that just walk into a Best Buy and they see this thing?
Yeah, there are two sides to this. Obviously, a Windows-based device is far more capable than an iPad. It's got a better user interface and user experience, whatever you want to call it. It runs Office, et cetera, et cetera. The iPad, however, has been around for 2 years. It's been very successful, and there are lots and lots and lots of apps. It's also backed by a very successful ecosystem that includes not just TV shows and movies and music, but also other content that some people don't even know exists, like iTunes U and the audiobooks and the ebooks and all kinds of other stuff. So the iPad, as we've said a lot of times on the show, is and Apple in general is kind of like the safe choice here for a certain consumer-oriented crowd. I mean, the trick is getting consumers excited about something like this, which they appear to be, and then calling out how much more powerful this thing is. I made a kind of a quip or a comment about the smart cover thing. Apple has this thing they call a smart cover. Everyone kind of drools over it. I mean, how much smarter is the cover on this thing than that stupid smart cover on an iPad? It makes the smart cover on the iPad look stupid.
I wouldn't be surprised if there is an iPad version that comes out in the next version that has a cover like this.
Yeah, but you know what? Guess what? If they do it now, all they're doing is copying someone else, and there's no way around that now.
It's using the same technology, Paul, right? As what Apple's using.
We don't know. There like there's so many questions around this thing. They showed a connector port where this thing connects to. It appears to be magnetic, right? That it latches onto the thing.
Here, let me see if I have an image of it actually from your site, from WinSuper site, if you want.
Yeah. Well, it's Microsoft. The image is from Microsoft, obviously. Yeah.
So there it is.
So this thing just kind of sits. Connect. It has to be magnetic. It has to be magnetic.
It's a pretty device. As far as the look of it, I think it's very Microsoft-like.
Yep.
And really pretty. I think this image right here is the selling point of this device.
I know. And by the way, if Apple had sold this thing 6 months ago and had called it the iPad Pro, they would have gotten a standing ovation.
Yeah, people would have been. It would have been in the front page of the New York Post.
Oh my God, it would have been. Yes, it would have just been a giant circle jerk of mainstream and tech media. Apple celebrating the fact that they've done it again.
Well, this image right here. This is what we've been talking about for months now. How we need a device that becomes, you could type on it and you pop it out and it becomes a portable computer and you pop it back in.
We'll see how it works, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that keyboard will be fine for most people. The question is going to be if it's fine for people that actually have to type a lot like I do. Maybe not, and it doesn't really matter. You don't have to, you don't have to use it.
Well, what they're going to eventually do, you're going to get a company like Asus or Dell. I know Dell has some tablets that are leaking right now, images of that. But what the device will be, in my opinion, what the laptop of the next 2 years will be is a very thin display, 11-inch display or 13-inch display, really thin. ARM chipset in the screen. So when you detach it, it runs as the ARM processor. When you connect it, it's running under the Intel.
Oh,
That's
like okay, so that's a completely different form of hybrid that you're describing. That's interesting. Yeah, why not? I mean,
we're going to
yeah,
see that. We're going to see that happen. We've seen it happen with these. I think Lenovo had debuted that Linux thing that was running, on a cheaper processor. I
yes,
think it was an ARM-based processor. When you detached it, it was running Linux. When you were connecting, it was running Windows.
right. Yeah,
So
why
we're going
not?
to see that. Um,
The other thing that's worth pointing out about this device is obviously everyone, my own article, I don't have it here in front of me, but I'm sure the title was something like Apple, or rather Microsoft launches their iPad competitor or whatever. A lot of people which is fair enough, right? I mean, I think it's obviously that's what it is. Um, However, from a strategy standpoint, Microsoft is not doing what Apple does at all. They're not making this thing. They don't. Apple does, or Microsoft doesn't make hardware. Even the hardware that they sell, they don't make. Microsoft doesn't make Xbox 360s. They certainly don't make their mice and keyboards and all that stuff. And they don't make
yeah.
this thing, right? It's made by Samsung. In this way, Microsoft's market strategy is the same as Google's, which actually I would say is arguably a bad sign, right?
Yeah.
Google has not done very well in the tablet market. Um, Google, and by the way, it will be exactly the same as Google because we know that sometime this summer, Google is going to launch their own tablet as they've done on the smartphone side. And so, like Microsoft, they will be making a device and then licensing the software to other, to hardware makers so that they can make their own devices as well that they'll essentially compete with each other. Somebody smarter than I, and I don't remember who it was, I read this somewhere online in the past 24 hours, noted that maybe Michael Gartenberg or somebody, that nobody in technology has ever successfully sold and licensed the same platform, right? That you either partner and let other people do it, or you sell it yourself. You can't do both. No one has ever done that successfully. So we'll see.
I don't know. I don't know what to say to that.
There's a lot of questions.
Yeah. What I'm wondering is if the OEMs are going to be upset at this.
You know, uh,
This has been the same debate
I
on
think I
why
told you this story.
Microsoft.
I have a friend from Microsoft who, at the time, worked in the Windows part of Microsoft, and he was complaining about Dell and how awful they were at the time. And then he kind of caught himself, and he said, "Well, obviously, we've been really shitty to Dell as well." And he said, when you think
Yeah.
about it, we kind of deserve each other, And I think that obviously Windows has been very successful for Microsoft partly because of this partner strategy. But on the
Yeah.
other hand, few people would deny the fact that the worst thing about buying an HP or a Dell or whatever brand of laptop is the crap that they put on there. And Microsoft has tried the passive aggressive approach where they do this signature program that no one even knows exists, where Microsoft literally buys the computer, takes it out of the box, wipes out all the crap that HP or whoever put on there, puts a clean version of Windows on, and then resells it, right? Nobody even really knows they do this.
Yeah.
Um, it's they've tried to get other people, or I should say other companies, retailers, whatever, PC makers to sell those versions as well. So far, none have taken them up on it. I've heard that Best Buy may be selling signature PCs sometime this year, so that would be
Oh,
the
very
first
interesting.
major push in that direction. But clearly, that strategy hasn't worked. Although I will say from experience that those signature PCs are significantly better than the same PCs without signature
So
on
how are
them.
they going to market this that it's a signature PC?
Well, it is a signature PC. I mean, I don't know that they will market it that way, but obviously because Microsoft's selling it, it's not going to come with, a bunch of crapware on it. So you're going to have a highly tuned and optimized version of Windows. Some people have said that this is an incentive for their partners to say, look, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
It's a little false because Microsoft has always come up with prototypes for its partners and to say, hey, look, here's how you do it. In fact, they used to show them off. We used to have a hardware show called WinHack. And Microsoft sometimes worked with other companies, like HP was actually a big partner for this, and sometimes it would do it itself, but it would come up with its own designs and say, look, this is what a Windows Vista device should look like, or this is what a Windows 7 PC should look like. And the PC makers never did it. They always went their own direction. As far back as people may remember, the first version of Media Center, which would have been in 2002, Microsoft came out with these prototypes and said, "Look, this thing should look like a living room set-top box. It should look like a stereo." And then the first machine that came out was a tower from HP, right? So here's their premier partner, the one partner that's willing to go down the rabbit hole with them, but they can't stop making the same crappy looking PCs they always make. They just couldn't
Yeah.
do it. They eventually
Yeah,
did.
it's a
by
big
the way.
problem for them. I want to continue this conversation, but I know there's a lot of new chatters here today, a lot of new viewers because of the buzz around the Microsoft Surface.
Okay.
Paul and I do this show every Tuesday. Well, mostly every Tuesday, whenever our schedules are working.
Lately, it hasn't
Yeah.
really been Tuesday.
Our
but yeah,
schedules have been a
usually-
little nutty lately. But every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, you could also subscribe to this show so you don't miss any portion of it. If you came in late, if you came in early, and you left or something happened, you could go to our website, gfqlive.tv, or actually I should say gfqnetwork.com. And we have a What Does Tech section right there. It's right in the chat room right now. Somebody posted it. You can subscribe to all our shows. We have an audio feed, a video feed. You can follow Paul on Twitter because he loves the Twitters at The Rot. You do love the Twitters.
I love the Twitters.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Zarian on Twitter. I got caught. I always get caught in these attacks on Paul on Twitter. And I'm always like, it's always like I'm like a casualty by default because I back Paul and I agree with Paul most of the time. So it's really funny when you see the Twitter and all of a sudden it's like, Andrew Zarian, you're a cheerleader. I'm like,
Yeah.
What did I do? What did I say? I don't even know what it's about. So you can follow us on Twitter. I'm Andrew Zarian, GFQ Network also on Twitter, and of course The Rot on Twitter. Also, it's on WinSupersite. So if you miss this show, you could always go to winsupersite.com and watch it there. Now, Paul, how are they going to? Now, this is the question I have, and maybe the chat could chime in on this. We're gonna have the Windows RT version of this device.
Yep.
And then we're gonna have the Windows 8 Pro tablet, which will be the Intel Ivory Bridge version of this. When I go into a store, how am I gonna know what's different?
I know.
I mean, and I'm not talking about me. I'm not talking about
Well,
reviews. I'm talking
I
about.
assume the RT version will come in all those bright Nancy Boy colors, and that the real computer will come in like a leather black
A
or
black,
brown.
yeah. See,
Okay, so I don't know.
I guess
It's hard to say. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm still astonished at the possible price point of this thing.
I listen.
I could kind of justify it with
honest,
the Intel.
I can't imagine. I guess the one thing we've got going for us is that people have been complaining about the price of the iPad for 3 years, and Apple's never changed the price. So, $499. They almost have to come out with one version that's $499.
I mean, if they were $399, I could justify it even more. They have to be more competitive, and this has been Microsoft has even said that these tablets are too much from Apple. The pricing is a little funny. I remember reading an article. I forgot who it was from Microsoft, and they were saying that the $499 price point is not a entry level price point.
It's not.
And
No,
they were kind of
Apple makes
hinting
great
that
product.
they would put a
People like
lower end
when
one.
that Apple's products are luxury products.
And what is Microsoft now?
Microsoft, they're like a third world country now, but they're. Oh, I mean, obviously, they're in Massachusetts. They would be Ocean State Job Lot or Walmart or something. I mean, they're not Nordstrom's.
I mean, I like it,
They
and
want me, but
I'll tell you where they have the advantage, Paul. I showed this to my wife yesterday. I had another show while the conference was happening, and I took the laptop up. I'm like, what do you think of this? And she goes, oh, is that the new iPad? She's a little disconnected. I'm like, no, that's actually Microsoft. 'Cause she does not like the iPad. She does not like the MacBook, which I'm surprised, actually, by that. Because she's not an advanced user. She has an IBM. She has a Lenovo ThinkPad, the hardcore work ThinkPad. So I showed this to her.
I would have been more interested in a 15-inch version of the MacBook Air, and am still interested in a 15-inch Ultrabook that looks, I've got like a Samsung, whatever it is, Series 9 thing. There's a 15-inch version of this. I just want to see it in person first. But to me, that kind of design is more interesting. I don't really care about like super, super high resolution. I can barely make out the little pixels on the high resolution screen this thing has. I mean, I'd rather have it be super thin.
Well, I showed this to my wife, and she turned around. She goes, wow, look at all the colors it comes in. I want one.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? That's what they're going to sell this on.
That's all you got to do, baby.
People are going to walk in, and it's crazy. And it's crazy to think, it's like a car. It's a car trick. I have family members. I said this once on the show. They always turn to the wife, and they say, what color do you like?
Yeah.
And and if the wife turns around and says, "Oh, I love the red one," they know they got the sale. And it seems like Apple's selling Microsoft, I should say. It's almost like this trick where it's like, "Hey, look at all the colors we have. Look, we have pink, we have white, we have teal."
Yeah, but the question, well, do we? Because, on the Apple side, those things are added cost, sometimes extravagant added cost, right? You can get the leather style.
$29.99. Yeah.
No, that one's like $69.99. I mean,
Jeez.
they're very expensive.
Yeah.
So
I think they're going to be successful with this, Paul. I think this is going to sell well. I think this is going to be a great step for them. And
yeah,
I think it's going to be a great numbers game for them to turn around and say, well, look how many we've sold. And look at how great Windows 8 is doing, despite people are
I
a
don't
little.
think we're ever. So here's the thing. I actually think it's going to do fine. I like what I see. Right. I have many questions, of course. That's unfortunately what I do.
Yeah.
But I mean, I like it. I get why people like it. I'm actually surprised they like it so much. In the same way that I was surprised that anyone fell for the marketing thing that was this event. I'm equally surprised that people are still kind of pining away over this
Mm-hmm.
device they don't even understand. But okay, fine. So Microsoft pulled this Apple-like event off. Good for them. Um, we'll see. On this stuff. We'll see. I don't expect that there's ever going to be a quarter where Apple is or in the next year where Microsoft's going to be able to say we sold more of this device
Yeah.
than Apple sold iPads. I just don't see that happening. But the thing that Microsoft has going for them is that these will be two devices in a field of like 180 that together will blow the iPad out of the water potentially.
Do you think
And
they have the advantage here?
that's a much bigger deal.
Do you think Microsoft has an advantage over the OEMs that will be putting out their own versions of, their tablets?
No, it's possible, by the way, that this thing came about specifically because Microsoft had partnered with Nokia on the phone, right? Where they had done the traditional partner model before Nokia signed on board about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And then, of course, with Nokia coming on board and significantly impacting the design of future versions of that Windows Phone OS, you could imagine that a lot of their other partners would feel a little threatened by that and would be a little freaked out by that. And so far, at least, it seems like they've kind of successfully navigated those waters.
Yeah.
And maybe that gave them the experience and the belief that they could do it here as well. And maybe they just looked at it pragmatically and said, look, we've been backing this bad horse now for decades.
Yeah.
You guys just aren't showing up. This is, what does it take for Microsoft to turn their back on their partners? I mean, think about that.
That's been a big problem. I mean, I know there were rumors years ago that there were rumors that Microsoft may put out a Microsoft computer, and that never happened because they do not want to turn their back on their OEMs.
This is not what they are, but the world's changing, and
Yeah.
you can point to any numbers you want about what's selling now. But I think Microsoft's actions, both in the design of Windows 8, which is you have to look at that Metro stuff and call it by what it is. It
Yeah.
is a mobile OS. That's all it is. You can run it on a 27-inch screen on a desktop computer, but that thing. It's a mobile OS. That's the people who are making Windows know where the market's going. That's where it's going.
Now the
And
big
so
question
these same
is,
people are making this device. So I mean, it doesn't matter what people are buying right now. They're making this for a reason. They know where things are going.
yeah,
So
I'm very excited about it. I really
Yeah.
am, and I personally, and I've been pretty vocal about this on the air. I'm not crazy about Windows 8. I'm having, and it's probably because I'm using a Mac every day, and I'm
Yeah,
not using the computer every day. And when the final version comes out, I'm going to
you know
kind
what?
of leave the MacBook Pro and use that exclusively till I could adapt to it. But there's certain things that I still find a little funky on it. But
You know what? Obviously I've talked about this a lot. I've written about it a lot. Windows 8 is a mess, right? It's like a glorious mess. It's like
that's
that.
a great
No,
description.
but it's like that. I was listening. The way you just said that, it was like I just bought like a bull mastiff or some other messy, humongous dog. It's ugly and it slobbers everywhere, and I have to clean up after it, and I love it. You know what I mean? Like that's Windows 8. You're like this thing's kind of a mess, right?
Yeah.
But there's a reason they're going in the direction they're going in, obviously. but we're also living in this world that is the world today, obviously. And so rather than doing two different things like Apple is doing, they're doing one thing and they're
Yeah.
putting them together. And we can kind of debate that until we're blue in the face, but that's what they're doing. And I don't know. I like it. I mean,
I do too. I mean, I don't not like it. I think it's great for what it is, but I think there's going to be a lot of people that are
I never would have
apprehensive about
designed this
going.
thing. This is not what Paul would have come up with. I mean, right? So there's not going to be an ad where I say I designed Windows 8. I never would have come up with this thing. I'm not saying I would have.
I would actually pay to see that commercial.
It would be like
I would
it would be like a hostage video with like a guy with a gun in the hip or something. Yeah. Okay. I get it.
holding up a newspaper.
No, but the thing is, but I do like it, and I still feel like on a desktop computer, you benefit from desktop specific advances, which are important. You can take advantage of the kind of peripheral metro interfaces. You never have to go into like the mail app or the music app or whatever. Although, I've been doing that kind of stuff lately too, where I'll run a video in the video app in the Snap View, or I'll play music through that music app in the Snap View, and I'll have the desktop on the rest of the screen. And the truth is, it works fine. It works
Yeah.
fine.
Well,
It's
Well,
it
here's
works
another
well,
question,
even.
Paul. Here's another
Yeah.
question, and there's a couple things missing. A lot of the success behind, we kind of touched on this yesterday because last week, because I spoke to Rob Greenlee from Zune, and I guess now he's Xbox Live, right?
He's on Xbox.
Rob,
Yeah.
he's on the Xbox team, and I had a chance to talk to him 2 weeks ago at Blog World, and we were talking about the direction of the podcast and category of the Zune and what's happening with Windows and what's happening with Xbox, even their marketplace in general. How are they going to compete with iTunes? Now they're getting in that category where they have to have an application that's on the desktop that kind of coincides with the
Yeah.
tablet and the phone.
Yeah.
We had the Zune software, but that's being abandoned.
Well, the Zune software is, but that doesn't mean they don't. But Windows 8 has all that stuff. It has an Xbox Music app. It has an Xbox Video app. It has an Xbox Live Games app, which, by the way, lets you buy games both for Windows and the Xbox.
But it's not. But it's still not a place that you. I still think it's a little confusing on the way that it's being presented. Everybody knows what iTunes is. You click
Yeah,
on
but
iTunes and you open up iTunes and you could have your music, your movies, your radio, your podcast. Everything is there.
Okay.
What is
So
going to be their equivalent to this?
they don't have an equivalent to that. But I actually think that the way Microsoft is doing it is better. Because when I think about buying music, I'm thinking about music, not about buying.
Yeah.
Apple has an all-in-one app that is a disaster, actually. I mean, that's true on the mobile devices as well as it is on Windows or the Mac. I mean, I don't think iTunes is something to hold up to be the iTunes Store. The actual back end part of it is fantastic. The front-facing piece is a freaking disaster.
Conceptually, no. Conceptually, the iTunes is absolutely perfect for what it does. Software-wise, awful.
Yeah.
It's a piece of junk.
No, but you understand that on the back end, Microsoft has the same thing. They call it different things, but I always refer to it simply as Marketplace or Microsoft Marketplace. It exposes itself in different ways depending on where you are. So when you go into the Music app and the Windows 8 release preview, for example, which is going to be renamed to Xbox Music, you can browse your own collection that's on the PC. You can browse the Marketplace. In a future version of this app, you'll be able to browse your collection.
This is on what device?
On the PC.
On the PC. On the PC. Okay.
Whatever you have. When you run a search against this app, it will search both your collection locally and eventually on SkyDrive, as well as the Marketplace, which, by the way, is exactly the same way that the Zune PC software works. When you run a search for an artist or an album or whatever it is you're looking for, video works the same way. Games works the same way. To me, these things all expose themselves in the right places. I don't think of commerce. I think of the thing, music or whatever. Some people will point out that Windows 8 does not have a built-in podcast solution. Will they add that to music and video, et cetera? Obviously, podcasting is important to us.
Well, I got a little insight on this, and there's no direction yet on this. They don't.
Yeah. So I was going to say the short-term vision is that this will be fulfilled by third-party apps, and there's already a very nice podcasting app, by the way, in the Windows 8 store.
I forget it every week, and we get
Slapdash,
Slapdash, and we get thousands of downloads from that application for our show for What's
It's
a Tech.
nice. Yeah, it suffers from the same problem as doing over-the-air podcasts in Windows Phone, where you get this kind
Yeah.
of subset of all of the available podcasts. You don't get 100%. I feel
Yeah.
like when I go to iTunes, I'm seeing everything. Um, so I don't know how that gets straightened out. I mean, in the Zune PC software, there was a way for you to paste in like an RSS feed URL. I don't know. I don't know. I hope that they have this or that they will add it, but it's decent for what it is.
Yeah. So I kind of want to move on to the next big story, and another big Microsoft story was that 56-page leaked PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
I love that it's 56 pages, Paul. That actually,
it's
I was like, that's a big leak. It got leaked last week. Actually on Monday you posted on your website. It got leaked over the weekend.
Oh, it's over the weekend, yeah.
If you go to winsupersite.com, it's right on the front page. You could follow the article. You could read the article. And it kind of outlines the next generation Xbox. There's no reference to it as a 720, right?
Actually, there is.
There is.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to blow my brains out, Paul. I'm so upset by that.
Well, so two things on that. One is this document is at least a couple of years old.
Yeah.
I've actually had a couple of people contact me on Twitter
2010.
and as if I was somehow pulling the wool over someone's eyes by not mentioning this in my article. Like, oh, I find it interesting. You didn't note you didn't note that this thing was 2 years old.
Well, it's September 2010. This is an internal, I guess.
I'm not really
document.
sure why that's relevant per se, but the stuff that they describe in there, by and large, that was going to happen over the last 2 years is exactly what has happened. So, I whatever.
Yeah.
But I obviously the planning for the next Xbox happens well in advance. I've heard from multiple people, much like I did about the tablet, that the 720 is not the name. I just think 720 is something that people throw up because it's obvious, 360 times 2. But whatever. I
But
don't
like, what are
expect-
you doing? You're just spinning in circles at that point.
About what?
The Xbox, and it's the 360. So like, I got it. It's like a 360
Oh,
spin
I
on
see.
it,
Yeah,
and then now
just
it's the
getting this-
720.
yeah,
You're just going in circles, constant. That's all we're doing.
So
Spinning the chair.
there's a lot that's interesting about this leak. One of the very interesting bits of it is it addresses the thing we talked about last week, which was, how does Microsoft, what if they don't have some kind of media that the game comes on? I mean, how are they going to distribute software? Are they going to cut out the stores? Remember, we just talked about that last week. And this thing says it's going to be Blu-ray based.
Very
which
interesting.
actually, to me, makes sense because I don't feel that Microsoft gets these events every time a new Halo game comes out, every time a new Call of Duty game comes out, where people do in fact line up at Best Buys all over the country. And if they cut out those guys, that wouldn't happen. If there was a way to get Halo 20 or whatever electronically downloaded to your console, no one would leave the house, right? These guys would never leave. And so I swear that the optical stuff is in there just to keep that piece of the puzzle going. And I'm sure they're going to have, because they do now, electronic software delivery.
Yeah, almost. I mean, if they don't do almost every title, I would be very surprised.
Yeah, but so that was interesting. I like the notion that it's supposedly gonna look like stereo equipment. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because people are gonna put it in their living room.
Yeah, so
I mean,
that's very interesting. I mean, from the image that we've seen, the mock-ups of it, and I'm sure it's not going to look like this mock-up, but it's a flat
Yeah.
device. It almost looks like your cable box.
Yep, perfect. Well, they talk about DVR a lot in here, and DVR. It's interesting. That's kind of contrary to what they're doing with the 360 because a DVR to me is kind of an old school thing. But that suggests that this thing could be a replacement for a set-top box from your cable company, and the fact that they're licensing the chipsets and the technology, the Xbox innards, if you will, and the software could appear in TVs and in Blu-ray players.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something, maybe the Xbox as we know it dramatically expands to the sides with this release, which is actually kind of interesting.
I wouldn't necessarily hate it. If it looked nice, if it kind of fit the look of it, I would still be happy with it. Listen, as long as that thing doesn't sound like an F-16 in my living room like the previous.
Well, they talk about
Xbox.
silent and no fans and
Yeah.
all kinds of different power modes. It's weird for we talk about the 360 today, and I'm sure we had this conversation where it's getting a little long in the tooth for video games. But one of the things it's really good, it will always be good at because of the power of the processing and so forth, is media playback. But actually, You know, the Xbox, for all of its power, is single tasking. You can only do one thing at a time. You can run an app and that's it. The system is not designed to do anything else. And that's, you know, its heritage as a video game machine, because obviously you would typically just be doing the one thing. And so they're going to add multitasking to the new version and the ability to run things side by side. That makes sense. And then the other one is that it does the current version is either on or it's off, right? And when it's on, it's often like full bore on. Like you'll be playing a game and you're stressing the graphics processor and the CPU, and the thing starts to heat up and it starts to get a little louder. This thing will support multiple power management states. You'll be able to stream video without coming back to life or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to run in all these very efficient
And
modes.
that was kind of the concept behind the PlayStation 3, because when you turn it off, it's not really off.
Yeah.
It's kind of on. You know, you have that little red light.
Yeah. Hopefully, the way this thing works is you never touch it. You know, that and the Apple TV does this sort of. I mean, I don't know that the Apple
I would
TV
love
actually
it to be integrated in the cable, just like how, you know, the Google TV is integrated.
Well, they talk about
Yeah.
doing background DVR while you're playing video games with it, right? So
Yeah.
this thing could be recording HD TV shows on one card, and you could be playing a video game on the screen while it's doing it. So
Yeah. This
it
is
seems
going
like
to
that's
be
the go.
it's a one-stop shop for all media, and it
Yep.
seems like that's what they're doing. A couple interesting points that I saw was how many processors this thing is. It's like an insane
Yeah.
amount of cores, and to the point that they still are going to support power. It's going to have PowerPC, couple cores of PowerPC chips.
It's actually going to, right. So I suspect that the chipset that makes up the 360, which is an IBM PowerPC based system, has, you know, come down, and they've been more efficient versions and so forth. I believe they're literally just including the latest version in the box. Like, it's like, you know, that's how we're going to handle backwards compatibility. We're not going to virtualize it, or, you know, whatever, however they do it.
I
We're
mean,
not going to
that's
emulate anything. It's just sitting in there, you know. It's like when I remember when the ColecoVision came out
Yeah,
with
yeah.
that Atari 2600 adapter. It was
Yeah.
just an Atari 2600 in a box. That's all it was. It was just, you know, the Atari 2600 had become so cheap you could just ship it in a cheaper box and use the power off the ColecoVision.
I think it's like 12 or 13 cores, right?
I don't remember.
It's like
exactly,
an
but
insane amount. And again, we don't know if that's actually going to be part of this.
No.
This is 2 years old at this point. That could have been an early idea that's totally
Yeah.
scrapped. For
this
all
could
we
be the
know.
greatest fake of all time, for all we know. But I mean, it's so detailed and so just so thorough. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd be shocked if this was the product of some fanboy, you know, dream come true kind of thing. But I you know, there's so many details. in
Now the
there.
pricing was what, and again, we're going back to this pricing thing. $299 starting price, and it's a 2013 release.
Yeah. Well, that's the starting price today, right? So for $299 right now, you could get an Xbox with 4 gigs of storage and the Kinect, right? And that's what this is. So I think they're trying to keep it there, which to me it does. They can't come up with this thing at $600. Right?
No. Those days are
This is not-
gone.
Yeah, this is not 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago, also, you didn't have this tapped-in resource for constant revenue. You know, you're able to, the
Yes.
idea of what you use these devices for has totally shifted. Now this device, they're not going to really make money. And, of course, it's always a loss. That aspect
Actually,
is always a loss. And the
they're-
dog is going nuts.
One of the
Here we
claims
go.
in here is that they're going to make money on this thing right up front, and will continue making money on it for the lifetime. You know?
That's fascinating. The fact
I had
that they're
heard, by
gonna,
the way, that the code name of this thing was 10. And I will point out that the life cycle of this device
10 years.
is 10 years.
Yeah.
And that they expect to sell 100 million units, which is the exact same run rate as the 360 today.
2013 to 2023 is
I
the
know,
life
can you imagine?
cycle.
Like, even thinking that far ahead is crazy.
Yeah, I mean 2023, the longevity of this device. I mean, but you know, PlayStation
If
did
I'm
the
not
same
living
thing.
on the moon by 2023,
Where are my flying cars?
I'm going to be upset.
I mean, it's sickening already that there's no flying cars. But there's a long-term goal, like they're going to add more services, like a cloud-based service in 2014, 2015.
Yep.
So
Yeah, media and for games, right?
for media games, and
Yeah,
that
they're
that would,
like, this is a platform they've really spelled out. Like, this thing comes out, but we're not done. It doesn't sit there. You know, it expands going forward.
the dog is agreeing with you. Yeah, Spencer, we know. I'm very interested in this, and this is kind of going into what we were talking about. I'm curious on how functional this will be as almost like a PC in your living room.
Yeah.
Full web browsing, video, search capabilities. You're going to have app capabilities on this thing. So I'm curious on how that's going to evolve compared to what we have now.
I think, as we got Wi-Fi and things, people would bring their laptops into the living room, and I think a lot of people listening to this have probably done the thing where you kind of bring out an HDMI cable or something, you connect it to the screen, and you play a video off of it, and you kind of play with that stuff a little bit, or maybe you even had an HTPC in your living room, still do, or whatever. But I mean, ultimately, I think the way the living room goes is the same way that general purpose computing goes, which is it gets simpler and more mobile, and the types of apps that we run on this living room HD TV are going to be simpler and more like the tablet type thing, and less like the desktop computer thing, And the 360 today, in some ways, is kind of there. It's simpleton stuff. I mean, it's single tasking. It's got a horrible navigation model. It also has a horrible issue where it seems like every time you run an app, you have to update it, which is painful.
I'm amazed that it took them this long to kind of even talk about a browser in this device.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I actually personally never really saw the value of it on the TV. A lot of people disagree with that, so obviously, and they're doing it, so whatever. But Sony had a browser in the PlayStation 3 years ago. I don't know that anybody really uses it.
Yeah.
Plus that's another thing you have to keep up. Sony's not a browser maker. I think one of the advantages with Microsoft is they make IE already, and so as IE gets updated, as it will, they'll update this version too. It's not just going to sit there. I don't use the Sony browser, so I have no idea. But I would imagine it doesn't get updated all that much. That it's probably certain sites it doesn't work well with. I don't even know what it's based on. I have no idea. It can't be a priority for them, but the browser is a huge priority for Microsoft. So in many ways, that could be an advantage for them.
I do want to take the sign, Paul, and do our Audible pick of the week.
Yep.
Paul is a big Audible fan, and so am I, actually. They're a great sponsor of the show. If you go to Audible Podcast, audibletrial.com, actually, it's definitely audibletrial.com/GFQ, you can sign up and get a free audiobook. Any audiobook of your liking. It's good for 1 credit. Mostly older books are 1 credit. And this week, Paul's pick is I, Robot by Isaac Asimov. We were talking about Asimov last week, and why not pick it again?
I'm starting to go back to some of the classics. I sort of wrestled between this one and Salem's Lot by Stephen King, which is one of his earliest books. I think his second book, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm surprised. Why is Will Smith on the cover of? I know he was in the movie.
They made a movie called I, Robot, which has almost nothing to do with the book. So the book I, Robot is not a single story. It's actually a series of short stories and novellas that take place in the Foundation universe. I think what they call the Foundation and Empire universe or whatever. It is the first in a series of books about robots, that he writes that take place in this universe. And I think the one central theme that runs through all these stories is the Susan Calvin character, who is sort of a person who didn't invent robots, but worked at, in the fictional company that made the robots, and sort of, tracked along the history of it and so forth. But Asimov, like Larry Niven, who was the author of the book we talked about last week, is obviously one of the classics of sci-fi, and one of my favorite authors of all time, and he's one of the most prolific writers of all time as well. So if you get into Asimov and you like the Foundation books, you like the robot books, whatever, you're in for a long ride, because this guy wrote like thousands of books. I mean, he just never stopped writing it.
So does this story follow the actual, what Asimov did, or is this following what I, Robot did? I still don't understand why Will Smith is on the. All
right, so sorry. There was a movie called I, Robot, which is based on, I think, one of the stories in this book. It has almost nothing to do with the actual book. It's highly stylized. Like the other high profile recent Asimov, semi-recent Asimov movie, I think, was called Bicentennial Man with Robin Williams, and that too was sort of like the story. It's actually just a story, by the way. That's another short story, but that he wrote. It was just a big deal. It was, it's a typical action science fiction movie. The stories are better. The stories are much better than.
I love the comments that people are leaving. They're saying it's too bad Will Smith is on the cover.
Right, I can't help with that.
I think you should say something.
Well, it's like when you buy if you were to buy Game of Thrones today, right? So the first book, because it was made into the first season of the show, has a graphic that's from the TV show. But then you buy books 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever,
Yeah.
and they have the old covers because those ones have not been, well, actually book 2 has, but they haven't all been turned in. That's just the way it is. Unfortunately, when they make a movie out of something, like the Stephen King stuff goes like that too, right? They make
Oh yeah,
movies
The
of almost everything.
Stand. I mean, look at The Stand. One of
Yeah.
my favorite Stephen King books, but the made-for-TV special was awful. Actually, that was one of the
Well,
better
given the
ones.
scope of the story, and it was okay.
I mean,
yeah,
that one was one of the better ones. There were some really bad ones.
well, The Stand is for Stephen King what Foundation is for Asimov, what The Lord of the Rings was to Tolkien. I mean, these series, well, or single books in the case of King, are just epic in scope and amazing and award-winning as you would expect. They're all of those are fantastic.
Here is a little sample of iRobot, Isaac Asimov's iRobot on Audible. So here it is. As I'm playing the clip, and I've forgotten that the audio is
I'll
also
just
playing
read
back.
from the book.
Here we go.
She got up from her chair. She wasn't tall, and she looked frail. I followed her to the window, and we looked out. The offices and factories of U.S. robots were a small city, spaced and planned. It was flattened out like an aerial photograph. When I first came here, she said, I had a little room in a building right about there where the firehouse is now.
Paul, what year does this
She
take
pointed.
place in? I forgot the year.
It was
So
torn
actually,
down.
so it's a span of years. In the books, the robots actually first appear on the scene in the 1990s, and so I want to say, I could be wrong. But I think the first book in the history of the in the books, the first robot might have been like 1996 or something.
Yeah,
like that.
I think so.
And
Yeah.
the clip you're playing I think it's from the intro, and it's a reporter who comes to talk about some anniversary that the robot factory is having or whatever, and he talks to this woman who's now like 75 years old. But the stories that are in the book are essentially her recounting things that happened over the history of the early days of the robots or whatever. So
Very, very cool. And
yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, audibletrial.com/GFQ. Get your free audiobook. Thank you, Audible, for sponsoring this show. I do want to. I'm not doing the traditional 10-year game this week.
Okay.
But I do want to continue a discussion based on what the Xbox is and the evolution of this device. And I kind of, we're talking about the 10-year plan of this device. And I thought it might be interesting to evaluate where it'll be year 7 or year 8 or year 6 for this future Xbox device. Because 10 years, a decade is a very long
Yeah, but
time frame.
something has changed here because the original Xbox, it came out in 2001, was and then replaced in 2005, and it obviously was in the market for another year, maybe, as a sort of a semi-viable machine. And that was kind of the way I think video games have gone for many years, right? The Xbox 360 and the PS3 and the Wii have been in the market significantly longer, and then now for the next Xbox, they're planning 10 years, longer still. And that kind of goes against the grain of this notion about how technology moves very fast and, and how do you do that. But there are hints in this document about how they intend to get there because they see this as an extensible platform that will always get better over time. And that will have multiple versions. And I think the way they're going to do it is, even though it's not really spelled out quite this way, I do think that we're going to see a media-only version of it that will be semi-low end. I think we're going to see the full-blown video gaming system that will be super, multiple cores, multiple processors, whatever. And I think sometime in the, in the midstream of its life cycle, they're going to rev the console. It will be the same platform, but they'll update the chips.
Yeah,
so that
they'll-
not just to be more efficient, but to
just
be
like
faster.
they did now, just like they've done it with the 360.
But more
Yeah.
to that. In other words, 8 years from now, or 8 years into this 10-year life cycle, you will probably see games for the next Xbox that will require the Rev 2 hardware,
Okay.
something like that. And I think that's how they're going to do it. I think what they want to do is stick with this platform, where the Xbox 360 and the original Xbox have zero in common from a hardware perspective. Zero. They're absolutely, there's nothing. I mean, they both run on the same kind of hard drives.
I know
maybe, but
people. I know people
the
still
underlying
running.
architecture is completely different.
I know people that they have an Xbox and they've hacked it and they run Xbox Media Center on this thing, and they use it as their media console. And the thing is unbelievable as a media streaming device.
That thing was a tank. I mean, the original one was cool. That was a very hackable device, either on purpose or because they didn't know what they were doing yet, whatever it was. But the 360 obviously has better DRM protections built in. There's some mention of that as well in the 720. There's even some hint that maybe they're going to try to prevent the used game thing. Although I think game makers are already going down kind of a slippery slope. Like when you buy a game like Battlefield, it comes with a code where you can play online. But then when you sell the game used, you have to go buy one of those codes.
Get another code, yeah.
So you're not just, the thing you're buying used is the single player game. To get online, you have to buy another code.
Yeah.
That stuff is unfortunate.
Now, this is the issue again, and it seems like Microsoft and many other companies are kind of leaving this idea where they baby the consumer. And there's going to have to be a different way of thinking, especially with devices like this. We're talking about just a media device, an Xbox version that's just media, maybe $199, and it's just media.
How about $99?
$99 and just media. Okay. So what's going to happen when, Christmas 2014 comes and this lower end device is on the market, and, mom really knows that Johnny wants an Xbox and goes to the store and she sees, wow, $99. Grabs it off the shelf and takes it home, and the kid can't play games. This is going to be an issue.
It's like the Windows RT thing. I don't, assuming that is in fact what they're doing, I don't know how they'll differentiate it. I mean, I guess all I'd say is even today, if mommy was going to walk into the Best Buy and buy her son an Xbox, she could still make a mistake, right? She could buy the 4 gig version and not the one with the hard drive.
Yeah.
And then he wouldn't be able to install his games to the hard drive, and he'd have to deal with the optical disc and all the problems that go along with that. So I think, kids know about this stuff and know enough to be very specific about what they want.
I think it's great that
I hear what you're saying, but I think it's healthy for the platform for this stuff to be available in lots of places. I think there's a neat future to be had if this thing could. I mean, imagine if FiOS had an Xbox set-top box. My God, how awesome would that be?
And I think that's where the future of this. I think year 5 or 6, you're going to start seeing FiOS and AT&T and Time Warner. You could add up, and it's an extra, $10 a month possibly.
There's a weird. It's probably a psychological issue where you always want more than what you have. For many years with the Xbox, you would log into the console with your ID, your Windows Live ID. And then you couldn't use another console easily, right? There was kind of a process where if you logged into another console, you'd have to download your entire history or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you go back to your original console, it would download it all again as if you had never been on there. It was just a real pain in the ass. And so, I don't know if last year maybe, or maybe the fall before that, but it hasn't been too much time. They've added the ability where you can very easily sign into multiple consoles. And so in my own home, I have my console in my office that I used to actually play games on, but there's one in the den that we use for all the digital media stuff. And because I want to use it all on the same account, I use the same account on both. And as recently as this week, the kids were watching something on the Xbox, and I turned on the console in my office, and I heard them groan because they were logged out of Netflix because I just logged on.
Because you just logged on, yeah.
The next step is obviously either having a family pass, which I think would solve the problem, or the ability to be logged on in more than one location, especially if you're in the home network. On the same network, which I know they can test for. So, we're never happy, right?
No,
but I mean,
no.
I think, this stuff gets more sophisticated over time, and hopefully they evolve it as the needs arise, or as the needs evolve, I should say.
One thing that we overlooked, and I guess it'll go into this discussion, is that those glasses that are being rumored now. Microsoft releasing these, I guess, augmented reality glasses that could accompany the Xbox in the years to come.
Yep.
What is the exact idea behind that? I think this is another gimmick, in my opinion. I don't know how great this thing is going to be. Is this going to be the future of the Kinect rather than having this bar?
Not exactly. So it's not clear exactly what it is, right? I don't think it's I don't think it's as simple as 3D glasses, although this thing will natively output 3D now, if you have such a TV set. I think it's more along the lines of one of those other, it's almost like a secondary screen type of effect, I would imagine, right? You know, where you could be using a tablet and be doing something with the game, but now you can use glasses and do something with the game. I mean, it's I see it as more of a supplemental thing, you know, much like the
I
Kinect.
actually have an image here, Paul. There it is.
Nice.
There it
That's
is.
crazy.
The Virtual
like-
Boy. That was
Yeah,
the biggest disappointment as a kid.
That was the red wireframe thing, right?
Yeah,
With the-
yeah. It was single-handedly one of the worst experiences ever,
Yeah,
and one of the
the
most
thing is-
disappointing experiences.
Also buried in this document is this notion that, you know, the Kinect is being updated, of course, and it's going to work in smaller rooms and all that kind of stuff, and rooms with bad lighting, which is a huge problem right now.
Yeah.
But they're also talking about the notion of what they call props, right? Which
Yeah.
is, you know, one of the real weaknesses of the Kinect today is you're playing a baseball game, and so you have to kind of hold your hands like if you're going to swing a bat, and you have to imitate it, or you do that with a golf thing or whatever. Those activities make more sense when you're holding something, which is one of the reasons why, even though the Nintendo Wii graphics are terrible, they give you all these little plastic things you can hold, and it makes it more like the game.
And it's totally inexpensive, totally cheap. It's like $15, and they sell all this accessories.
Yeah, so Microsoft's going to start doing that as well, and I think I actually think that makes a lot of sense, because if you want to you know, have a like a sword fighting game or something, or a Star Wars game, it'd be cool if you could have like a foam sword. You could be actually fighting someone and
Yeah.
have it translate onto the screen. I think people would actually be into that, you know, and it makes more sense. It's more natural feeling, I would say.
I don't know. I find it very. Another rumor was that you're going to have multiple pieces of the Kinect. It's going to be 2 or 3 pieces that you're going to put around the house strategically.
I see. Yeah. Oh, like a
Like
this is
markers.
Like how we get to the holodeck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't wait for that. I can't wait to have like these little orbs all around me, zapping me with.
You're just gonna have a room that's gonna be like black with a grid on it, and you're just gonna sit. You're just gonna grab a drink and sit down and be like, "All right,
Yeah.
entertain me."
Jess is gonna.
Yeah.
My wife is gonna come home. I'm gonna be in that like Tron outfit. It's like on the wall
Exactly.
like this.
See
It's
you
like-
wearing the spandex again.
It's very cool stuff, and I you know, this is stuff that we like. You know, tech enthusiasts, we love the speculation of these futuristic devices and these things that we would have never imagined are becoming a reality, or would become a reality now. And it's really cool to see it happen. And a company like Microsoft, which 10 years ago or 15 years ago was looked at as this old, you know, bad company, you know, they were the antichrist of tech companies, now has become
Right.
this cool cutting edge company again. And companies that you wouldn't imagine have become these old dinosaurs. So Microsoft has really changed their perception, especially, you know, in the media. For many years, they were just looked at as this boring company. I owe that to Ballmer, of course, and his charisma.
Well, it's, you know, Microsoft's been around for a long time and they've been successful, and so, you know, the perception is they're soft, and you know, and it's certainly true that Microsoft has seen a certain amount of success doing a certain thing, and they've hard times adapting to different markets, to different product types, and so forth. So this is an exciting time. I mean, the Xbox 360 right now is in a good place. I think I think the way it works now is great.
Yeah.
So this next gen Xbox stuff is like icing on the cake. It's fantastic they're doing this stuff. You know, Windows 8 is really exciting. It's certainly garnered its fair share of complaints and concerns from people and all that kind of stuff. But you know, people who think this is going to be like Vista all over again, I think they're missing the point.
Yeah.
Windows 8 is setting up Windows for this completely new usage scenario thing that they would have otherwise been left out of. And those two things, even though that's really just the tip of the iceberg, suggest that Microsoft is not sitting still, and is in fact in many ways moving much faster than I think people really give them credit for. So
Just to speculate on this before we wrap up, when do you think we're going to get a glimpse of the next generation Xbox? When do you think something like that will come down the line? If we're a year away, like let's say holiday 2013, so we're
Yeah.
a little over a year away.
it may not literally be till next year, you know, at the
E3.
next E3. I mean, or you know, maybe one of the other video game conferences that they have. It doesn't make sense for them to talk about it this year because they're revving the dashboard on the existing 360. They've got, new Halo, new Gears of War, new Call of Duty. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff happening that still makes the 360 very interesting this year. And a lot of it isn't necessarily game related too, which is curious.
Yeah.
But yeah, next year I think it's it's time to get the ball rolling. But
Very cool.
CES, that
Possibly.
wouldn't be a bad place.
Yeah, possibly.
January,
Very
sure.
cool, Paul. Of course, check out winsupersite.com for all things Paul Thurrott. Let's see what your post is. I'm sure you've had a very busy couple days, and apparently you have some super secret blog posts happening tomorrow morning, right?
Super secret.
I don't know. Everybody's saying what is that post going to be about? Everybody wants to know.
There's two posts.
There's 2 posts happening tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And
One of them is ginormous. And it's probably not hard to guess what it's going to be given why I'm here.
the iPad.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah,
iPad.
okay.
It's I'm going to assimilate over to the Apple side.
A very long review and delayed review
I had a
about the
small
iPad 3.
stroke, so now I can only use the iPad.
So tomorrow, everybody check out winsuperside.com early in the morning, 8, 9 o'clock, you said? 9 o'clock?
9:30ish.
9:30ish. Okay, very cool. Also, check out Paul every Thursday on the Twit Network for Windows Weekly, 2 p.m. Eastern, with Mary Jo Foley and, of course, Leah Laporte.
I will tell you this. I'll give you a hint.
Okay, a little.
Because I've noticed some people are going to try to live blog tomorrow's event. What I'm going to publish will make a live blog completely pointless because I already know everything.
Okay.
So you can read a live blog if you want, or you could just read it before the live blog happens on my site because I already know what it is.
You already know what it is. Very okay.
So
that explains everything.
You could do that, but you could do something else instead.
Also, you can check out our website, gfqnetwork.com. If you miss any portion of the show, you could go and subscribe. We're on iTunes. We're on Zune. Definitely subscribe. If you're up for it, you could leave a little review of the show. That helps us out big time. iTunes likes that. And, of course, we're on Zune. And we get a crazy amount of downloads from Zune.
Really?
Yeah.
Good thing it's going away, huh?
Yeah, good thing it's going away because we do very well on the Zune. The one thing that we do well in is going away. So definitely subscribe to us. You could also subscribe, of course, on the website at gfqnetwork.com. I think we're live again next week at the regular scheduled time, right, Paul? Or are you?
Yeah, I actually, so my traveling is done until we go to Europe, so I think the next month we should be good. So.
Very cool, Paul. I appreciate it, and we'll see you all next week on What the Tech. Good night, everybody.